Hello, hi, good morning, happy Sunday. I was homeless on the south side. I was staying on the south side because I thought I wouldn't be recognizable with how many people go there to go out or go out to eat. And I would sit over there and I would park and I would go and take walks. I would go and get my food and I would exercise. And that's the energy that I put into the south side, right? I had energy, right? Positive energy. And when I lived in Sheridan in Pittsburgh, this girl kept bothering me. And then eventually her and her baby's dad started bothering me. And I didn't know he was the baby's dad of all the kids. My mom was staying with me for a little bit, and my mom said, he's not all of the kids' father. But the guy, come to find out, the guy had other kids. The girl, my mom would stay with me and look out the window. And the girl would walk out and walk. And she'd be like, all right, see you. And my mom would say, that's weird. Don't they have a car? Why is she walking, right? Next thing you know, these girls started showing up at her doorstep. They started showing up at her doorstep angry, right? And it appears the girl was starting problems with these girls. And then the police were being called. Nothing was being done, right? One of the girls showed up with a baby in the stroller. Another girl showed up and said she already had the guy's kids. But nothing was being done about it. The girl was bothering me too. She was bothering me and she kept trying to come at me like she wanted to be over me, right? Over top of me in my head, like over my head. And that's how she kept trying to come at me. Like, oh, this girl's not that. This girl's not this. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, I was going to work. But people do not understand those layers and levels and how they affect life and society, right? It's energy. And my son had to witness that, right? And when the police came, my mom, we called the police. And my son was like, Mom, don't say anything. But I asked the girl, I said, what is the problem? After I asked her what's the problem, she ran off. Like she started to get an attitude and agitated and ran off. And then that's when the dude was like, oh, she called the police on us and we don't do that. We don't, he was saying they don't do the police and this and the third. And then they was threatening saying they wanted to punch me in my face and this and the third. And they was threatening me, saying they was going to get someone to jump me and all the above, right? They were saying they was going to get someone to jump me. But I never had the problem that existed. I never had a conversation with this girl. Never had a conversation with this girl. I knew that they smoked weed because I always smelled it coming from their home. And I never had a conversation with this girl. Never had a conversation with this girl. I tried to, but she ran off. When my mom ran the car over the hillside and my mom was drunk. But I didn't have no test to prove that my mom was drunk. And the girl runs out. I heard them, they was talking about me before she even ran out. They were talking about me. And she ran out like, as I was talking to my mom, and she said, do you need help? And I stayed silent because I was still talking to my mom. But the situation at hand is I wound up becoming homeless because the situation escalated, right? There was nothing done about the situation. I was told to go to the magistrate's office. And I just wasn't used to handling situations like that while I'm at home and trying to rest. And my home is my peaceful space, right? And my son was going to school. And I kept my son in a city school district so that he can go through the Pittsburgh Promise to get further his education in college. And that's what I went through the Pittsburgh Promise funding for, so that he can go through the Promise funding and go to college. And my son, he went to college for a little bit, but he was denied the Pittsburgh Promise. My son was denied the Pittsburgh Promise, but he was allowed to go to the championship, the basketball championship, which I said didn't even make any sense, right? At the time, all his friends were friendly. They were all cool. Everybody was getting along. You know what I mean? And my son started drinking. My son started smoking marijuana. And situations started escalating, right? I send my son he comes in my house one day drunk. and I call the police so they can go to the hospital. And they send him home. They say he's able to go home and think for himself, right? This is that he goes to Heritage Valley, right? They send him home. So next thing you know, my son came down to my house drunk, and he got an attitude about something. And I was trying to explain to my son, when situations don't counteract as they should, they don't align correctly, right? And he was drunk, and the situation escalated, right? And that's why the second time he came to my house drunk, I wanted to take him to the hospital. I called the police, and he went to Heritage Valley. They sent him home. They sent my son home. And then my son got into another altercation with his cousin. Him and his cousin got into an altercation. My son said my cousin hit him, and then my son hit him back, right? So all these interactions and counteractions, right? But my son was the lead at his school and at the church. He was the lead for the basketball teams. He was the lead at the schools, right? He was the leader in other instances as well, right? He was the lead at school, right? In certain life situations. And now they have him as the lead as disorderly conduct and engaging in fighting on the south side, right? And all of this happened when the situation could have been rectified, right? So when you look at this situation, where did the actual situation exist, right? And that's where we got to think, because I spoke on it several times, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know of that situation," right? And where does this actual situation exist? Does it exist on the police video cam when the police were called several times to this girl's house where this girl and her dude are threatening me living in my home and trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle? Or does it exist when I was living on Harlow and the lady kept calling the police on me and telling me to send the kids outside because they're making too much noise in the house? Or that I'm being disorderly with my son? Or I'm not safe in my house? Because she reported me to the government too. So where does this systematic issue exist, right? Or do you see the light in a situation where I'm constantly running Sean back and forth to baseball practices and not having a vehicle and catching jitneys? Like, where does this situation actually exist?